Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to our channel. My name is Tanya Morrissey, and I'm a spiritual coach based in Ireland. And today we do have a heavier topic in which my beautiful friend Stefanie will be joining me. Stefanie is a death doula and holistic therapist based in West Waterford. And the topic that we're going to be discussing today is death and grief. And so the reason why I want to give, it's not even a warning, but perhaps just an advisory that if you're going through grief at the moment or just any personal issues, to just, hold patience perhaps while listening to this episode, some care to that if you at any point would like to just pause this episode and come back and listen whenever you're ready, that's totally okay too. That I do plan on asking the difficult questions that we all wonder, and Stefanie will share her experience from being a death doula. And yeah, so I think we will just get going. So Steph, would you like to perhaps introduce yourself to our amazing listeners?
Yeah, hello everyone. Lovely to be here, and thanks for tuning in and listening. I think it's as Ton already said, it can be an emotional topic, but I think it's a very important one. So I'm very delighted to be here.
Thank you. And first question then, for those that aren't sure what a death doula is, could you even just explain the role of a death doula and what's part of your role?
So if any one of you knows a midwife who is kind of there as the support when a being comes into life, that's a similar role but just at the other end. So it covers actually many different aspects, from the holistic side, making meaning, but also being there for the family, maybe the organizational side, and kind of being also that bridge to the other network which is there, like the helpers, the funeral homes, and also the time afterwards, so bereavement and grief support. And I think, just being there as an emotional support that has time. It's the time and the space that often the family and the carers might not have, or that in hospitals and hospices that is not maybe so much there, but is needed for that time.
I think it's fair to say that it's everyone is so familiar with a midwife that it's like we're so prepared to help people start a life and bring life in. But when it comes to helping people coming towards the end of their life, so either the person themselves that's passing away and the family that's connected to the person and friends, there's not as much help there. That this role, especially here in Ireland, it is definitely brand new, because I wouldn't have grown up ever hearing of a death doula. It actually came through when I was reading a fiction book before, and I remember going down a rabbit hole of, what's a death doula? And then when we happened to cross paths and you mentioned you're a death doula, that's the only connection that I have, and you're still the only death doula that I actually know. So here in Ireland, it definitely wouldn't be a familiar service, if you will. There isn't that designated person that you can go to help with all aspects of death. And just so for our listeners are aware that for the next few minutes when we are discussing death, we are very much in the sense of a human. So when a human passes away, that you have so many jobs. A part of that, as you said, like the funeral directors, the guards, and just so much. And there's not much preparation. There's lots of preparation when bringing a life in, but not a whole heap for when someone is passing away. Why do you think that is?
I think it very ties in with the reason why you don't meet too many death doulas, because before that, when maybe our society was more village based, the community would do that. You know, like you would have maybe the broader family looking, someone would be with the body, someone would maybe bring food to the family, look after the family. There would be, the community would hold the role of the death doula, because death happened quite openly in most cultures many years ago, because there was no hospitalization, there was no like bringing the body away from the family or where they lived. And it was only through that kind of, when industrialization kicked in, that it wasn't like to stop spreading diseases or things like that, you know, we had hospitals, people were brought somewhere else to die, and there were specific people then looking after that. And it's only then when they realized, okay, but that doesn't fulfill the emotional, physical role of what that person still needs while going through the process. And then only then that role is filled by what we call death doulas. But I think we actually want to, we would like to get rid of ourselves and bring it more back into the community.
Yes.
That people feel more comfortable, and because it needs so many people. Similar to that saying, it needs a village to raise a kid. It also needs a village to, you know, let someone go in their journey to that last chapter.
Yeah.
Like there is, as you said, the organizational stuff. There is the support of the family, or just even being with the person, like just being there as a neutral person who can just sit in the often intense, maybe emotional, painful state. Yeah.
Do you think it's fair to say that people nowadays do fear death a lot more because it's not as part, or it doesn't feel as natural as birth does, because of that separation now? It's like back then when the person would have passed in their own home with families around, the village came along, like there was, you know, everyone involved. It was like far more of an integrated process, whereas now it seems to be a bit more separated. And with this separation, from my understanding anyway, and just really digging into my own grief and understanding of, you know, the end of life, is it appears because it is that more separation now, that if you're like included more, or if it was discussed openly more, there won't be such a fear.
Yeah.
Because fear is a very strong emotion. It could be quite like it can, yeah, it's strong. Fear is a very strong emotion that I think many just don't like tap into. Just kind of no, cross that bridge when we come to it. You know, whereas if it was like discussed openly and as normally as it is bringing somebody into the world, I do believe that it should be as normal to speak about someone leaving the physical. You know?
Yeah. I feel it's you touched on some good points there, that it I think a big thing is that separation, but also I think naturally as human beings we tend to avoid decay and death. Like there's something intrinsic in us which it leans towards life and growth. So there is a natural confrontation with our own mortality when we see something, and there's maybe a sense of overwhelmed knowing that we can't stop.
Yes.
Whereas a bringing into birth has that feeling of maybe excitement. But even if you look at birth, what I found interesting, if a lot of people are excited about like the pregnancy, but actually the birthing process, that is like it's messy and it's painful, and nobody talks a lot about that part. You know, like I think we lean towards the and I think it's fear often, or it's being confronted with like maybe the messy, uncomfortable part that we will then be with, you know, in that process, which can be everything, and it's very kind of it can be very unexpected, you know.
That's
that
very
nobody
true.
knows. You can prepare for death, but you can stay very calm and silent the days before, and then when it comes to it, who knows, you know.
That's so, it's kind of like it's the unknown.
Yeah.
You, from your experience, I would imagine, or from your work, is that's what people actually struggle with, is the unknown. Like, it's easier to prepare for things that are known, so the actual pregnancy, when the child arrives, but the actual birth, you can't know. It'll just happen when it happens. And same with death. Like, you can prepare, if you're someone who's terminally ill, and you kind of have time to perhaps like prepare like your funeral, if you can have a role in that, or if it's sudden, you know, like, it's the family aren't prepared, so it's the unknown is kind of what humans struggle with. That's interesting.
And I feel it's also with the unknown that means that we're shedding all those layers. Like, you see how either it's the role of that the person had in the family or in the society, or the way they acted, or even their physical body, all those layers that made ourselves, or that connection to those around us, so relatable, changes so dramatically. It's the stripping back of them, and that process can, depending on how the person dies, can be very intense. And I think it's that intensity of tapping into the messiness of the not knowing, of the stripping away that which felt so familiar, that we were familiar with. Yeah.
And how do you, as a death doula, when you're working, say, with family or whoever, is there different ways in which you prepare the actual person that's passing, and then, say, the family and the friends? Like, how do you prepare people for death, that it is inevitable, they know it's coming? How do you prepare people for that, or can you?
You can definitely plant some seeds, I would say. I think we always have to meet people where they are and go with, but I feel talking about it is the very first thing, to really, you know, sit down and to go through, for example, with the family, it would be often going through if it's a sickness which is life limiting, so it might happen over a process of time, so it's not a sudden death, but it's kind of something that can be witnessed, to go through, okay, what changes will appear here, like physically, emotionally, mentally, and to support them in their grief, because they are basically grieving while they're step by step letting go of
It's very true.
the contact to that person, because it will change. And what do they need as an organization, or maybe as a network of support to, because you alone as a death doula should never be there on your own. There should always be different people, you know, the family, the friends, whoever else in there. And I guess for the person who's dying, again, it depends very much on in what state or where they are. Often it's again having that open ear, that they know you're not holding on to them like a family member. Like, they have that ear for you to say, I'm afraid of death, or to make a meaning of that, or maybe to review things, or to go into what do they actually want, or what needs to be released maybe before they can go with more peace.
That's actually something I would like to dig a little bit deeper in, is when a person is facing the end of their physical life and they're in that state of review, they're going through the process of, you know, acceptance, even that, like, and they're probably appreciating everything more, and all the emotions of, you know, I could only imagine is perhaps 1 minute they're just really, really sad because they're just mourning, and they're sad perhaps for not even just themselves but all the people that they love, Like the fact that that person, you know, they know they're not going to be around, and who's going to be there for X, Y, and Z, you know. But then also really grateful to have also, say if they're parents, that they got to bring life in, or if they're artists, they got to create art, if they got to plant a tree in the ground, you know, just would you mind taking us through like a common experiences and for that person, say when they are towards the end, like is it kind of like that roller coaster? Is there ever anyone that just kind of takes on the chin, like, you know, I don't think, you know?
Yeah. It's quite like a roller coaster, I think.
Yeah.
But it depends. I think it goes with waves, like often. I think similar, you know, with every kind of shedding that we do, you know, we kind of review, something comes up, we review it, we express it. There might be thankfulness, maybe, you know, it triggers something, there might be anger, or we're finally ready maybe to write that letter to X, Y, and Z that we feel still maybe that there is something. And then there is maybe another moment where the person really feels close to death, and something maybe even deeper comes in, maybe like really like the what was the meaning of life.
Yes.
So I feel like that can bring up then another layer to where the person maybe goes into that, and it's often not even so active. It can be very indirect through when people see things, and people then maybe are in that in-between state of, you know, seeing their ancestors coming in, or talking to things, that too is a process of kind of these in-between worlds of reviewing, of releasing as well. Yeah.
Is it like an existential crisis nearly? Like
it is, yeah.
If I say just from what I'm gathering, it's nearly as if they're going through, like, quite literally an existential crisis. It's like, oh my God, I once came from the ethers, here I am in the physical, and I'm very close to going back to the ethers. So the next thing that I would like to just ask then is making peace then with death. The person that's passing, do they achieve peace with death? Perhaps the family and the friends around, do they can they achieve peace? For the people listening, that perhaps haven't really thought about death as in the way that we're talking about it, like how would you view death and put it in a way that it's natural as birth, even though it's unknown, far more unknown. How is there a way to achieve peace with death?
I think definitely, and I think if we take that example of birth, it is often that intensity, that crisis before, like similar when you're pregnant and you're going into labor, you know, like there's the urge to, you know, for the baby to come out, or there's pain, and that pain allows you not to stay. That pain thrives you to move on. And it's often, and I don't want to glorify pain because it is a very intense emotion, but that kind of intense period before, I think, helps also the family, the friends, but the person to not want, they because you don't want to stay in that. So it kind of, death then, I haven't been with too many people at the moment of death, but usually after, when you go in, the death is if you think physically, it's the last exhale, it's a releasing, and there's usually a calmness in the room. Now, I can't talk for the person, I haven't died yet, but for me it always feels like that at the end there is a peace in the surrendering, in the birthing into whatever may come then.
Yes. Honestly, that's really beautiful to hear, because I'm just even reflecting on the passing of my own nan, which was only a few months ago. And in fairness to my nanny, she had myself and my sister really prepared. I'm not sure if she was as open with the rest of them, but we just happened to have a really strong connection. Lou and I, we were very open with nan, and with time she began to open herself up more, because she's very, very like old stock Irish, like it's, you don't talk, it's, you know. But as the older she got and the older we got, and it was even before COVID started, she just said, because she would have been quite religious, so if God is ready to take me now in the morning, I'm happy to go. Because what she said was, I raised my family, I got to see my grandchildren, I got to see great grandchildren. She had the love of her life. Unfortunately, she was a young widow, so my nanny didn't have it easy at all. She also, like, she was a single mom raising all her children. Like, she, as far as a life goes, it wasn't easy. Yet it was so fulfilling for her, because all she loved was her family, and she got that. You know, she loved her family. She's very proud of her family. She's proud in the fact that she raised her family. You know, and so when it came towards the end of her life, she's like, sure, you know, it's up to you now. It's kind of like, I've done my job. And although she took a lot of pride in being independent, and she actually was now up until the very, very last night, like, it's, I very much knew she was passing away. I said it 2 days before she passed. I said it to my brother, who I'm able to talk about too, because he'd be able to say it just as open too. I said, I think Nan is dying in front of our eyes. And then he goes, Ton, she is. There's, you know. And then she did pass 2 days later in her bed. She always just, her one wish was to go up to bed one night, close her eyes, and that'd be that. You know, that's all she's saying. If God takes me in my sleep, you know. And her health was, of course, beginning to decline. Like, she was becoming weaker. She got 88 years here, you know. And knowing that she was at peace with passing, I'm sure. So what I like to think is that we're not actually scared of death. It's actually just the process. Like, we're not actually scared of once we pass and kind of what's after that and death itself. I think because we're naturally, like, our existence comes from nothing in a sense. Now this is talking just pure like energetics, and if you want to go deep into like the science of things and matter and whatnot, and because that's essentially our core, I think there's a part of us that's actually already acceptant of that, and like we're quite receptive, and like that's okay. It's just the human process, because you said no one likes pain. So if we can escape that, we will. And that's, I could see the process with my nanny then. Like, everything you said there, she very much resembles that process. Like, you could see there was suffering towards the end for her, like physical suffering. And sure, of course, that would lead into mental suffering. That she was really okay and ready to go. Like, she accepted that her death was coming towards an end. She prayed, of course, that it wouldn't be painful. Of course, we'll never actually know. She passed away in her sleep, and she lived on her own. But all we can do is pray that it was. By looks of it, it was, you know, from they do the autopsy. Well, she didn't actually need the autopsy, but from what they could tell, like, doctors and whatnot, very certain, like, she closed her eyes and, you know. But yeah, it was more so because she was okay with passing. I was okay for leaving her go physically. Now, of course, I still cry. I have my moments, because, you know, I'm human, and I've known her for the moment I'm born up until the day she passed. You know, you're never. And I think with people, when someone they love passes, and it's that thing of, oh, back to normal, you're never going back to normal. You're adapting to a new norm, because the person isn't with you physically, but rather just energetically. And not even just energetically, but they're not there physically. So and we yearn as humans for the tactile and the touch and the hugs and the conversations and the hearing and the seeing. That once our brain, what I do love about our intellect is that we can have memories. And those memories are so powerful that we think of a time of when we were laughing with that person, and it brings up that joyfulness. And then what tends to follow is a sadness, because you remember that they're not here, because you're bringing up something from the past, but then your brain catches up with the fact that you're in the present and they're not here. But underneath all the grief is actually just love. Like, you're in so much pain right now and sadness because of just how much love is present. So death and grief is ultimately love.
It's love and life, yeah.
Yeah. And so after someone they love passes then and someone close to them, is there any advice, even generally speaking, and saying just from experience, and you know, they say everyone deals with grief in their own ways, which of course is true. No one escapes this lifetime without experiencing grief. You have people that like shut down, people that'll just talk, people that hold on to like an item, or they might go down the route of alcohol or something to escape, or any advice when it comes to grief?
I think if I'm trying to put it in one, grief is heart-based. Heart-based. It, as you said, it comes from the love and the connection that was formed to that person, that time, you know. So it's really, it's a lot about allowing the space in the heart to feel and to allow that transformation of the person still being in your life, but in a different way than through memories, so maybe still feeling the presence of the person. And ultimately, that's actually the best tool, like allowing your heart to feel love and feel grief in all its different colors, I think is actually the best preparation for death.
Yeah.
Because it makes you it humbles that human experience, and I think it opens us up to all the greater losses that we will face as well, if we can stay with that heart connection, which we ultimately then have that big loss at the end. So I always feel like the better we deal with grief, I think the more we will be open and present with death as well.
Yeah. And perhaps even more compassionate, because like death brings people together as well.
Absolutely.
People that, and they realise like, wow, what have we, let's just say, God forbid, there was people arguing and they're like, what were, you know, it really brings a great reflection for people. Like death brings existential crisis, which I don't always think is a bad thing. I think it really allows people to evaluate what are they doing with themselves, and it nearly inspires a different growth.
Yeah.
To either change the course of what you're doing if it's not serving you. I think death can also be quite inspiring for people, because we all at some point experience grief. Grief of someone that we love so dearly, and we just hold that so much love, yet the pain of losing, and like again, it's that heartfelt centered, that it does make you just reflect it on your own life, which can also be quite powerful and transformative, I suppose.
And I think those quality of that that raw and real, and sometimes maybe the discomfort of that, because it can be raw, is like to see that actually as a gift. I think that's what I feel people are struggling most with, is that I think it brings us to a place of rawness, which can be a gift and such a treasure, but it's also not it's a raw treasure, you know. It's kind of like a raw diamond. We have sharp edges, and we don't maybe know how to hold it, or
it's like
it moves, and the heart, and we tend to sometimes maybe close the heart when we feel lost or when we don't feel supported. But to understand grief is heart based, so actually to do the opposite, to lean into support, to express, to feel. Like grief wants attention, it wants expression. And sometimes expression can mean I just want to be by myself for a couple of days and have a nice bath, but it's actually calling the heart to express and to connect with the heart and
to pour,
yeah,
you know, quite literally
to
pour,
mourn and whatever,
cry, scream, laugh.
Yeah,
because the Irish are very good at laughing, you know, and taking the mick, as we say, out of each other, which is good and all. It's so true though, but like, it's because grief forces you to feel. However, it's important to release that then, so that you're not just keeping it all in, bottling it all in. And that's true. That's when we see people falling sick then afterwards, if they're experiencing intense grief, is perhaps with their physical or mental health, which can happen. That to feel your emotion, it is very heart-centered, to leave it out, to lean into the support, and it'll just make the process easier.
Yeah.
You know, time is the healer, but I think it's what you do in the time is important. You know, because it's... Yeah, that's why I like to, especially with grief, is they say time's a healer. But if you're not expressing within the time, like, it's going to be just as heavy now and next year.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas if you lean into the support, leaning into your heart, if it's journaling, or as you said, in your own time, or going to like a death doula, or turning to a friend, a family, partner, the priest, even, like, if like whoever. Because at the end of the day, it's very rare to be turned away when you actually just reach out and be like, I'm feeling really sad. I'm grieving. Because it's what connects us all. We all experience it. No one gets out of this lifetime. So it is quite a shared experience. A collective. You said something a few minutes ago, which I would like to, if we just tap into also, is the different forms of grief that people probably, they don't realise is grief, but they go through it. So the different types of grief then, that isn't just about the physical and the human. So grief in their day-to-day, like a relationship, or leaving a job, or, you know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so basically grief is the reaction of the heart to loss and change. So when our connection to whatever it is that was in our life changes, and that can be, as you said, it can be our wish to, you know, get that position in our working place, that can be a home country that we had to leave, or a partner, or an animal, or even like wishes or expectations that aren't met. The heart responds with grief, and it's a natural process. And I think the more we can be aware of these, sometimes they subtle losses over a long length of time, or sometimes they're very much, you know, like
Sudden.
but we have to be conscious of them. The grieving process starts, or we can tap into it when we are conscious of, hey, you know, this was a loss. This is, you know, the body is physically, emotionally reacting to that, and the whole system is adapting or changing. But I think the more we can be with our heart and aware of our energy, we notice those subtle or bigger losses throughout our lifetimes, and there are many in different intensities, but they all touch us in different ways.
How about the grief? Because it's just an interesting one now that just came into my head there. When people go through the loss of self, they feel like they're after losing themselves, and they're grieving a past version of themselves, and they really, we're all like, their might, they're trying to hold on to this past version of themselves that just isn't there. So say before they experienced a sense of trauma, or they got a medical diagnosis, or an injury occurred, or something that they once loved doing, you know, it's that they attach so much to their identity. So just an example that I have is someone who loves riding horses. They accidentally have an accident, they're paralyzed, say, from the waist or the neck down. They no longer can do that. They're now having like an identity crisis because they don't know who else they are without that. Any advice for the person who is going through something like that someone who they once thought they were, they've now been faced with something kind of like externally to look in and reevaluate, because what they could once do that they loved is no longer available for whatever reason, and they can't do it, and now it's attached to their sense of self. Is there a way of either finding a new love, or can they just accept that it's not there? It's, how can they essentially find themselves after losing who they thought they were? Does that make sense?
I feel like usually what happens, especially when it's a sudden thing, like an accident, and we really, as you described, can't ride horse, like that was our life and it's not possible anymore. There will be a time where even our brain, like it's amazing what happens in the brain when we grieve. Like the whole brain cells have to rewire. So there will be a time where, and it can be long and it can be shorter, where we're still naturally will be thinking, about all the activities that we did. And then of course the reaction then is very emotional, because at the same time we realize I can't. So it takes even our whole nervous system a longer time to make those connections, to
Catch up.
that to catch up. So that's why you have the impression of the grieving brain, that it's difficult at that time to memorize, to think.
Yes.
And when our brain is going through that process, a lot of the brain cells actually die and they have to reform. Okay. So it is a time of making, where we naturally, physically and mentally are drawn to, or even, actually it's brilliant from what the body does, we are in a way then forced to making new connections. So I would suggest, to be very gentle and kind with yourself, and that is absolutely normal, to keep thinking and to be sad, and to honor that, and maybe to have a ceremony about it, to make it conscious, to mark ending and grief, but in a way that feels, honoring and releasing, but then also to do both. So to tend to grieve and to the honoring of, that which had been experienced, but at the same time to also notice that even though it might be very subtle moments during the day, but that the mind and our being is leaning towards, or maybe I could do this. Yeah. There is a seed in us that is then learning and tending towards, okay, maybe I can meet friends. Maybe at some stage, maybe I'll be ready to meet someone, and to allow that to grow as well. Yeah. So kind of always to go with two feet, to acknowledge, to create ceremonies, to understand that the whole system is reacting to that. Yeah. The whole brain is rewiring, but it's also rewiring towards giving space for new things to come in without the old things to be eradicated. You will always be a person who have loved horses and who would love to continue that. And that will always be there. Nobody wants to take that away, but maybe something wants to be added in there that can also become part of your container, part of your experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very much like that seesaw effect. Do you think like spirituality and religion could have a role in that process too, in the sense of, because there's like that, period of like existential crisis of like, who am I? This is all I know myself as from doing X, Y, and Z. I now have to kind of explore other options, but I'm not, it is that complete, like, do you think it forces people to maybe not even force, but do you think it helps? Does spirituality make the process a bit easier if they understand that they're more than their physical and more than their mind, is essentially what I'm asking?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the turning points and deep insights we get through crisis, so we get through getting challenged in our belief systems, in what we thought we were, or what we thought we have, or we thought what is stable. And when that gets shaken, it touches, I think, a part of us that that then can also deeply learn something, or remember that there's more. It's
not their sole purpose as such.
Yeah. And I think a person who can, and I think spirituality is a huge thing in that, to hold themselves in that mystery of life, and to be very much in tune and trusting and open, and knowing that they're more than our body and more than our mind. It is, I think, easier to hold whatever comes then into your life.
Yeah, whatever may or may not come.
Yeah. Or not, or if it's beautiful, or whatever colour you might have.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share on death and grief?
I think what I noticed is voicing.
Yeah.
So I think naturally in an island, like lamenting, or because it's often not words. I think we often had that someone is grieving or someone is like dying and we don't actually know what to say. Like it often goes beyond what we can address maybe with words.
Mm-hmm.
But I think our presence, and I think and our truthfulness is what we can give, and to not be afraid to to show that, or to say that, like, I don't know how to be with this, but that feeling of I'm
here
with you, and to be okay with being raw. Like there was a time when I think lamenting, or we tend to maybe lose our voice or shut down the heart when we grieve, but maybe it needs the opposite, to cry and to weep, or to express our love, and to be okay with not really sometimes knowing what to do.
Yeah, but that's so true, Steph. That's so true. It's actually, like, funnily enough, you kind of took the words out of my mouth with that one, because it's I was just reflecting on times where someone I know that's going through grief, like I won't necessarily know what to say, but I'd seem to just be like, look, I'm here. And when I was going through intense grief and the passing has just happened, it's like, I don't expect you to say or do anything, but it means a lot that you're just there. I think we just thrive off support and the connection and the truthfulness, and having space in which you can just be vulnerable in is a huge healing it's a huge part of the healing.
But
I just want to thank you so much. I really don't feel the need to just say, like, you just articulated it all so beautifully, and I really, and I'm not just saying it, like, there's a huge need for death doulas, and especially here in Ireland, and I firmly believe that, to just help change the narrative, because I do feel it's just the remembering of the process of grief, that it's as natural as birth. Just everything you said today, I just really want to thank you for, and I really believe that those that are listening to this now, and if you are listening to this now, I just really hope that you did gain an insight, a different insight, reassurance, that I think you'll agree with me that Steph has just explained everything so honestly as well, not just beautifully, but very honestly, is what I will say. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And if someone does want to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
I'm on social media, or so it's Stefanie with an F. Yes. And then the surname it's Blech. and if you type that in, or if you type that into Google, you'll find me as well. There.
I'll leave your website in the description box so everyone can contact you. And if you have anything else that you'd like to share on our discussion today and our chat, please do feel free. We'd only love to hear from you. It's something that's needed to be discussed openly and honestly, and consciously too, I think is the word, just very consciously. So thank you all so much for tuning in today, and we look forward to hearing from you. I'm sending you my love always.